What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. My name is MrHurriicane, and I thought today I'd put together something a little different. And as you can tell by the title, I want to talk about this Minnesota Vikings win in the playoffs against the New Orleans Saints. And I also thought it'd be a perfect time to finally talk about how I got into football, how I became a Viking fan, and how I became a YouTuber that focuses primarily on football and just loves to create these football experiences in video games. So we'll start just by talking about this Vikings-Saints game for a little bit. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be, but I don't plan on having much for you to watch. Just wanted to record something, and I don't do a lot of content anymore talking about the real NFL season. During live streams, I'll usually give thoughts on stuff and have more conversation there. But as far as videos, that really hasn't been a thing in a while. But in this situation, I definitely want to talk about this game and that moment that Stefon Diggs and Case Keenum created. It's a couple days now after the fact, so I've definitely settled down a little bit. But after that play, and the rest of the night just flew by. I could not fall asleep. I was so excited. And I'll say that that was really the defining moment so far of me being a Viking fan. That was as good as it's gotten. The team has not had a lot of success. You have the New England Patriots who are about to play in, I believe, their 7th consecutive AFC Championship game. Since I became a fan of the Vikings when I was 8 years old, I'm now 25, I've seen them play in 2 NFC Championship games. 2 of my least favorite days of watching football in my life. So the Vikings don't have anything to compare to some of the franchises out there who have won rings and done greater things. But now they're one step closer to having that opportunity. So the Stefon Diggs Minneapolis Miracle, it was just the most amazing thing I've seen as a Viking fan. As a Viking fan, that is like the last thing that you would expect. The franchise has had a number of great Hall of Famers, great seasons, and great moments in team history, but almost none of those great moments have come in the postseason. And now they have one that's going to go down in NFL lore as one of the greatest finishes to a game that we've ever seen. It is the first NFL playoff game to have a touchdown expiration in regulation, and obviously the situation really dictates just how great this was. The fact that they have a chance to go to play a home Super Bowl, the fact that this was in their stadium, the first playoff game in the stadium. For all the great moments I've seen as a Viking fan, the situation has never been that important. When I look back at some of my favorite moments, there was the Brett Favre Greg Lewis throw, which is probably the one play in NFL history I've watched the most. Not for long. I've seen this Stefon Diggs touchdown now more times than I could count, but I've been watching that Greg Lewis, Brett Favre touchdown now since 2009, so I got a little catch up to do. But I've seen it with Joe Buck's call, which I think was great. Paul Allen, Vikings play-by-play. I really enjoy his commentary, and he more than anybody has influenced the way I do commentary on my channel. I just love the excitement he brings to the game. And that excitement and passion for football is something I try to bring to my series. And if you follow my content, you know that I love franchise mode, and I want those same experiences in game as good as I can make them. And we've had some fun ones, that's for sure. But as a Viking fan, I've been waiting a long time, not as long as some, but a long time for some great moments to look back on, and they're just few and far between. You have the 2009 play like I mentioned. The 2012 season was great, especially that Week 17 win against the Packers to get a wild card spot. That was one of the best games I've ever seen. There was Brett Favre getting to play the Packers in the Metrodome. That was a really fun game, and then going to Lambeau Field for the same thing and winning that one as well. There was the US Bank Stadium opener against the Packers. That was a phenomenal game. But none of these situations really meant much. This is one of the biggest Vikings wins in a very long time, and now they have a chance to play in the NFC Championship game. So let's just go through. I know I spent 4 minutes talking about other stuff, but I do want to get into this actual game. Going into this week's game, I was really confident in the Vikings, and that hasn't always worked out in the past, but I thought that this was the team with the best defense in the NFL, with the most deserving coach of the year, with how Zimmer has helped craft this #1 defense and also navigate this team through losing their quarterback and losing Dalvin Cook and turning things around from last year so quickly. Last year was one of my least favorite years as a Viking fan because it all came crumbling down, and there were so many bad games in that second half. None really worse than that Colts loss where they just came in and embarrassed the Vikings at home. That was terrible. But coming into this Saints game, I felt like the Vikings had a good matchup against them. I thought that they would do a really good job at taking away the running backs, and really on the ground, Kamara and Ingram didn't get a lot done, but Kamara had that phenomenal touchdown catch. I thought that, Xavier Rhodes did a good job against Michael Thomas in the first game, but Thomas made some plays against him in this one, had the nice touchdown against Rhodes, and then another one against, I believe, Terrence Newman down near the goal line. Michael Thomas, I think, is already becoming a top 10 receiver, and the Saints have done a great job the last 2 years making the most of the draft and making the most of the years of Drew Brees' prime that they're still going to have by nailing the Thomas pick, by getting all these great defensive players like Marshawn Lattimore and Sheldon Rankins. I don't think anybody gave the Saints any kind of credit going into this year. I know I didn't. I was high on the Buccaneers going into this season, and that now looks completely ridiculous. But I mean, a team with Drew Brees can only be so bad. They got 7-9 3 straight years, and I guess never considered that things could ever change. But the Saints were very good this year. Very strong football team. One of the more balanced teams in the league. And they had a good formula. One that can work in the postseason. It's just one big play at the end swings everything. But I was confident in the Vikings winning this game. And I thought that they really should win it by double digits. I didn't think this had to be a very close game. I was most worried about the Vikings not playing a competitive, intense football game since the Panthers matchup, which was separated by over a month because the Vikings had easy games really against the Bengals, Packers, Bears, then a bye week. So I wanted them to come in and hopefully start well, and they really did. The biggest concern I had was they'd fall flat in the beginning, and then Case Keenum would have to throw their way out of it. And it was kind of reversed. Drew Brees had to throw the Saints out of the hole, and boy, he had the best game that any quarterback has had against the Viking defense in a long time. The Viking defense is no joke. They were at mostly full strength in this game, but Drew Brees was able to really conquer them in the second half. And if the Saints had won, that would be the storyline, how Drew Brees conquered Zimmer's defense. And he still did, really. The Vikings had firm control of this game for the first 35 minutes, but then Case Keenum got sacked out of field goal range, and then here come the Saints. And you get that feeling of, here we go again, as soon as Case Keenum throws that pop-up. He's thrown a few passes this year, trying to make a play that isn't there. I do get kind of nervous now when he's going deep, especially if the ball has a very high trajectory, because that just gives the defense more time to react to it. And there are more defenders back there than there are receivers in that area, so bad things are going to happen. And then Drew Brees was surgical in that second half. He didn't make mistakes. The accuracy was on point. Receivers did not let him down. The Vikings had a couple chances to win the game. There was a fourth down throw that he hit Willie Snead on. Perfect accuracy. Tough throw outside the numbers. And the Saints defense was also doing a good job. When they could get to Case Keenum, he didn't do much. I think his passer rating, I read, was like a 5 when he was pressured. So going into the latter parts of the game, it definitely felt like the Saints had all the momentum. Vikings took it back for a little while, and the Saints were able to take it with that big block punt. And then we had the situations, with the field goals. And it was surprising enough to see the Vikings able to rebound to get Kai Forbath in range for, a 52 or a 53-yard field goal. And we know the Vikings' history with field goals in the postseason. Blair Walsh, Gary Anderson. Didn't want to see a third name added to that list. And Forbath nailed his kick, but they left Drew Brees too much time. And then Will Lutz gets that field goal, leaving the Vikings 25 seconds left. And with the false start to begin that drive, that's where I basically lost hope. They had the false start. I knew it just got even more difficult. First couple throws didn't work out. And I know they wanted to work the sideline, obviously. You want to work the sideline. But I thought after that 19-yarder to Diggs that they had enough time to work a pass to the middle and then get a spike down. And if you look at the play before the Diggs touchdown, I think they had a chance with somebody wide open, but I don't think Keenum looked his way. I haven't watched that play a second time. I don't really have any need to, because with 10 seconds left, we got the Minneapolis Miracle. And I was sitting there, confidence shrinking at a rapid rate. Second half, very nervous. 17-0, I still wasn't all that confident because I knew, one touchdown and all of a sudden it's a 10-point game with Drew Brees. Leads don't look that big. I needed something like 24-0 to feel a little bit better, and we didn't get that chance. Saints came back. We go to the last, 10 seconds of the game, and I hardly remember watching the play. It was just one of those moments where it was just such an in-the-moment experience, because I don't know if I've ever had emotions go from 0 to 60 that fast. I remember just kind of tracking the ball in the air, and then all of a sudden, Stephon Diggs makes the catch and there's no one around him. Obviously, Marcus Williams going for a hit, went past him, took out Ken Crawley. There's no one left, and I could not believe it. My first instinct was obviously, get out of bounds, but quickly I realized there was no one there. And that's when, I obviously freaked out. I don't even remember what I was screaming, but I know that I was yelling, and I was running around so excited, and I could not believe that it happened. Those are the kinds of things you expect to happen to the Vikings, not for the Vikings. So they, for once, in a playoff game with a lot of magnitude, are able to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. And I just checked this today. This is pretty sad here, but that game was only the 4th playoff game I've ever seen the Vikings win. I became a fan of this team in the 2000 season, so I was not a fan during the 98 season when Randy Moss had his tremendous rookie year and the Vikings had one of their best chances to win a Super Bowl. But obviously, heartbreak, Gary Anderson in the playoffs against the Falcons in the NFC Championship, they don't make it. I don't remember that at all. One of my earliest memories of watching Viking football was actually them beating the Saints in a division championship game. That was in the 2000 playoffs when they won 34-16, and that led to the infamous 41 donut game. So one of my first games watching the Vikings was, a great big heartbreaking loss out east, one game from the Super Bowl, 41-0. And I remember actually watching the beginning of that game. Giants went and scored on the first possession of the game, and I believe it was Mo Williams on the ensuing kickoff fumbled. Giants get the ball and I think scored in one play. And I was just kind of sitting there waiting for the Vikings to get into it, and they never did. And after that, they weren't very good for a number of years. Denny Green got fired the next year, Mike Tice took over as head coach, and the Vikings didn't make it to the playoffs again until the 2004 season when they went out to Lambeau Field and beat the Packers. That was an insanely fun game to watch. Then they lost to the Eagles. They went to the playoffs in 2008. I was actually at this game when they played the Eagles in the Metrodome, and the Eagles beat them 26-14. Then obviously there's the Brett Favre year. Beat the Cowboys in the divisional round game. That was just the 3rd playoff victory I'd ever seen them. They destroyed the Cowboys. Keith Brooking complaining about Vikings running up the score was pretty enjoyable, 34-3. But then obviously lose to New Orleans. It's always been something with this team. The Blair Walsh miss, that one obviously terrible. I'd say not the worst one I've experienced. I remember watching the Josh McCown to Nathan Poole touchdown that kept the Vikings from making it to the playoffs in I think 2003, I want to say. And that was only a touchdown due to one of the worst rules ever in the history of the sport. The push-out rule was ridiculous, which was basically a rule saying he didn't get 2 feet down, but if it weren't for that defender pushing him out of bounds, he would have. Ridiculous. So I've seen a fair amount of Vikings heartbreak, and this was looking like it was going to be just another chapter. And there wouldn't have been, just one heart-crushing play necessarily, but instead, a collapse in the second half at home with a home Super Bowl at stake. Obviously not from this game, but down the road. You don't want to lose one and done when the stakes are that high, and they almost did. And if it weren't for the Minneapolis Miracle, wow. And there's still a chance this season ends in heartbreak, and all Viking fans are still definitely bracing for that potential moment. Maybe something happens this weekend, maybe in the Super Bowl, who knows? But now the Vikings are one game away from playing their first Super Bowl in more years than I care to check. I do think they have a good chance to win this game with their defense, if they can just stuff the run and make things tough on Nick Foles. But I'm really worried about the Eagle defense up front, because I think it's the easiest way to beat Minnesota is to pressure Keenum and make him throw bad passes and take advantage of them. And the Eagles have one of the best pass rushes in the league. So I think the Vikings have to have a different kind of game plan so they can play safe and hopefully turn it against the Eagles to where their defense can win the game instead. Who knows? I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I don't expect a lot of offense. Shouldn't be too cold unless something drastically changes, but that Philadelphia defense is excellent, and I would have rather had the Falcons match up in Minneapolis than see the Vikings go to Philly. I want them to emphasize Keenum's mobility, where he's been so good outside the pocket this year. Use misdirection, slow down that front seven a bit, because if they just come out and try to run up the middle and have Keenum, just trying to air out passes, I think it's going to be a bad day. But regardless of what happens, at least us Viking fans will have the Minneapolis Miracle. It's a division round game. I mean, it's not the biggest thing in the world, but it was one of the most incredible moments that I've ever seen. And if I had to think of the best moments I've seen as a Viking fan, that one's now at the top. There is the Brett Favre to Greg Lewis play. That's somewhere near the top. Vikings winning against the Packers both times in 2009. Beating the Cowboys in that divisional round game. And then, I'm also a Twins fan. They have not had much success in my time as a fan either. But they've won a couple World Series. Granted, the last one was the year before I was born. And since then, I've never seen the Twins or the Vikings even make it to either a World Series or a Super Bowl. And so much in Minnesota sports, you have to be able to really enjoy regular season games and early round playoff games, because I've seen the Vikings now win 4 playoff games and the Twins win 1 playoff series. That's it. But I will say the Twins getting that Game 163 win against the Tigers back in 2009, the day after Brett Favre and the Vikings beat the Packers in the Metrodome, which was a little over a week after the Greg Lewis touchdown catch to beat the 49ers. That Twins game, definitely one of my top moments as a sports fan. So we'll just see what happens from here. The Vikings are now one of the final 4 teams remaining. Home Super Bowl still on the line. And hopefully they can head out to Philadelphia and get it done to finally have a chance against either the Patriots or the Blake Bortles-led Jacksonville Jaguars. So, I've talked a bit about some of my best moments as a Viking fan, which, I really enjoy the Vikings. It's just there haven't been a lot of fantastic moments that have really meant something. I've seen so many great regular season performances and whatnot. I get hyped up for those games, but man, it's nice to get hyped up and excited over something that's a little more meaningful. So thank you, Stefon Diggs, for helping etch one of the greatest moments in Viking history. And wow, Case Keenum really has a chance to take the Vikings to the Super Bowl. I was so down on things after they lost in Pittsburgh this year. Nobody could have seen this coming. The last thing I want to talk about today is just how I became a football fan, how I became a diehard Minnesota Viking fan, and how that really led to me getting into video games all at the same time. So basically, when I was younger, I wasn't really into sports. I just wasn't really exposed to them very much. I knew some names. I knew who Randy Moss was. I might have known who Dante Culpepper and Robert Smith was, but I didn't watch football in the 98 season and the 99 season. I don't recall any football before the 2000 season. So I wasn't really into games or sports at the time, but I did have some family that enjoyed football, and I have an uncle who didn't live near us at all, so I didn't see him very much when I was young, but he was a diehard Viking fan and a big sports gamer, and it just happened that there was a week or so when he was in town, and it might have been even the week that Madden 2001 came out, because what happened was I was hanging out with him one day, and then he took a nap. And the memory isn't perfect, but I believe I was watching him play Madden. It would have been probably pretty new at the time, and I had some interest in it. I think I just kind of wanted to be interested into what he was interested in, so we'd have something to talk about. I just kind of wanted to fit in a little bit. And I had my own PlayStation, I think, at the time, but I definitely did not play Madden or any sports game for that matter. But I popped in Madden 2001, and I had enough knowledge to go into the settings to set the difficulty to rookie, which was the easiest and still is. And then I set the quarter length to 15 minutes because I knew that in football there were 15-minute quarters. I don't know why I cared about that, but I set the settings to that. And I jumped into the very first game of Madden that I had ever played, which was Vikings versus Tennessee Titans. And I played a full game on 15-minute quarters on rookie, and I lost that game. It had to have taken between 2 and 3 hours to finish that game, but by the time I had done it, I had broken the rushing yard record and the rushing touchdown record with Viking running back Robert Smith, but I still managed to lose the game. I don't recall the score exactly, but if I had to ballpark it, I'd say it was like 93 to 77. And I remember that in the game, Madden 2001, I don't think that when you call the passing play, the icons would pop up on the screen right away. I think you had to hit X to snap the ball, X to bring up your icons, and then you could throw it. I didn't understand that. I threw a couple times on accident, but I couldn't figure it out. So I just ran the ball like halfback draw over and over again on rookie with Robert Smith. And from that day, I was hooked on not only Madden, but football. And I wanted to do nothing else but play Madden and watch football from that day. And I remember I finally got my own copy of Madden 2001 for Christmas. And I was introduced to franchise mode. And that's where I've been ever since. I started up a Vikings franchise. I know the first thing I ever did, because I began to actually follow the actual NFL, and I became, pretty knowledgeable just like who players were on various teams. And I knew who was good. And so what I'd do is I would start a franchise controlling the Rams and the Saints, and I would trade Dante Culpepper and Robert Smith for Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk, because I knew they were really good and I wanted to win. Now, Culpepper and Smith were good too, but I just had to get the two best players pretty much in the game on the team. And I really didn't have to do that, especially playing on a rookie. Come on, man. I remember watching the Vikings 41 donut game, and then I hated the New York Giants for a long time after that. I held a grudge against them probably until they beat the Packers in a playoff game sometime in the mid-2000s. And I remember watching the Ravens diabolically destroy that team in the Super Bowl, and I was like a big Ravens supporter for a little bit. I wasn't like a Ravens fan, but I was like really happy about the Ravens, and I started my own Ravens franchise. And I remember early on just really enjoying the idea of creating my own league and having my own experiences, and I just loved seeing what would happen in these games. I did some fantasy draft franchises, and I still remember that I had one fantasy team that was led by Chris Carter and Warwick Dunn. I really liked, getting to know different players around the league and then get them on my team in Madden and create great seasons with them. So that began for me. The road to doing what I do now on YouTube started when I was really 8, probably 9 years old, once I got into franchise mode deep. And there's obviously no formal training to become a YouTuber, but I feel like I definitely had years of experience leading me to this point. I also remember in elementary school, there was, in one of my grades, I know I had to journal very consistently just to practice having legible handwriting, essentially, and knowing how to spell. And it wasn't for anybody really to read, it was just practice. So I just wrote about games I played on Madden. I just wrote about different, the game I had played the night before and how a certain player had, won it for us or whatever. So that became what I loved. And I don't think it's the most interesting story or anything, but to me, the most interesting part of all of this is just how easily none of it could have ever happened, because I wasn't really exposed to a lot of football. I think at some point I would have, because I had so many friends growing up that, were big football fans. And I think eventually I might have been exposed to it in some way, but maybe not in the same way. And who knows how much different things could have been. Like, what if a Packer fan had gotten to me first? That would have been terrible. But yeah, from there, Madden 2001 is where it all began. I've had every Madden since. Franchise mode has been my primary way of playing. There was a time when I quit playing franchise mode, probably from like the 07, 08 seasons until Madden 2011, just because I wasn't really having fun anymore. I wasn't having a great time in franchise mode. I wasn't getting sliders to where I liked them, and I just kind of played online, and then after, enough losing, I'd end up giving up on the year. But then I got back into franchise mode when, after I graduated, I decided that I was going to give this YouTube thing a shot. And I didn't really know what kind of content I was going to make, but I knew I had Madden 2011, and I thought, let's just try putting something together. And my first stuff was obviously very rough and a little bit hard to watch these days. But boy, it started to get a little bit of views, and I realized that, hey, maybe I can do a little something with this. And now here we are. To me, it's just really interesting how, one day really sparked something in the football realm with the Minnesota Vikings and with video games that has now come to transform so much of who I am. And that to me is just crazy, just how easily it could have never happened. So it was Madden 2001 that got me into football, into being a Viking fan, and what got me into games. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. The Minneapolis Miracle was a fantastic moment for us Viking fans, and hopefully it's not the only moment we're celebrating here during this season. I want to thank you all for watching and supporting the channel, both this channel and my second channel, which has been seeing just unprecedented growth. Same day as the Minneapolis Miracle on my second channel, I set the views and subscriber growth record on that channel, and then Monday set both again. And I am very thankful to be able to spend so much of my time working on content revolving around games and football, two of my favorite things there are, and creating these experiences. If you haven't already gone to the second channel to check out that Cleveland Browns rebuild, it has been more popular than I could have ever expected. So if you're into content that's more about me building a team than me playing the game, that's definitely the one for you. Many people over there subscribing and enjoying the series, and it's different than what I do here on the main channel, but I like to do a lot of different things on these channels, as you know. And I'll have some more franchise content coming your way this week. I do hope to have a Twins franchise video to complement both Kalispell and the Chicago Bears franchise. And then on the second channel, of course, it's been Matt Pierre in his now 5th season in the NFL, now with the New Orleans Saints. And then this Cleveland Browns rebuild. So I thank you all again. Please leave a like on the video. Subscribe if you have not done so already. I'm on the road to 200K on this channel and the road to 100K on my second channel. Check out any content you've never checked out before. See if it's for you. And I will see you all later. Have a great day. Skol Vikings.